Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daily Revelations. Thanks for joining me and be on this journey as we're starting our journey through the Bible over the next year. So, and we're still in Genesis. But just getting started. So I want to bring you into Genesis 15 today. Actually, I read through 13 through 15 today. But what struck me the most that I wanted to share about today was just how the chapter starts out. I want to read it to you because I find myself doing this often. And it said that in a vision, God came and told Abram not to fear. How often do we lay in bed at night or in the morning or through even a sleepless, restless time, fearing, thinking about the things that we can't bring about just because we're lacking? And Abram was in that place, soon to be Abraham, but I'm going to call him by the name that the Bible calls him as we're going through, just to signify when that change happens. But he had been told by God twice already what this covenant was that God wanted to have happen for him. And he was worrying. He was fearful because he had no descendant. And yet God said, I'm going to bless your descendants. And so he took that fear upon himself and was losing a lot of sleep over it. And God met him in that place. He didn't condemn him for feeling that way. Instead, he went back through and he said, this is what I'm promising you. And and Abram believed him, and it was counted to him for righteousness. That's where that verse is stated. And then from that belief, God went further. And he even said to Abram in verse 1 that he says, I am a shield to you. And so that's what I wanted to talk about, as belief in God is actually when we take up the shield of faith that God allows for us. We have to wield it well. We have to put it in front of everything that comes at us instead of allowing that fear to creep around. We need to move it in the directions where that fear is coming from and allow that protection of faith to block all of those things that come into our mind that make us lose sleep. That God doesn't want us to lose sleep over. He wants us to be rested and ready for all that he has for us. And yet the worries of the world will take over. So as I was going through this, I made some notes about just how God shielded Abraham's fear. And the things that he did for Abram is what he does for us. The first one is he met him where he was at. God didn't condemn him. He just said, yeah, you're right. That is something that is not coming about, but it's nothing you need to worry about. And he just met him at that place and was just reassuring to him that may be a fear he has, but it's not a justified fear. And next, he reminded him of his promise. We have to take our mind off of the things that we fear and put our mind instead on the things that God promises us. And that's the stuff of his word. That's the promises he gives us. That's what we need to dwell on. And I found when I was going through my years of depression, I always focused on my fears. But when I started replacing those fears with God's truth and just repeating them and memorizing them, that was when the fear had no place to stay. And God did that for Abram. He came in and he said, this is what you need to focus on. These promises are what I have for you, not those fears. And so, and then God corrected him all of his misaligned thinking which he has to do with us. And that's why being in God's word every day is so important, is because we get off track. And this will put us back on track. When we dive into God's word, the Spirit in our hearts will say, maybe that's not exactly the way you should be thinking about that. And it corrects us. It realigns us. And spending time in God's word every day does that in little increments instead of it happening after huge things and us being corrected and going, oh, man, I got to get back out of this hole now. It's better to make those corrections smaller and quicker. And then God did another thing. He reminded him of his track record. And so often we forget God is so big and that he is way beyond what man can do. And he kind of put Abram in his place, and he should do the same with us. When we get off, we put ourselves on pedestals or other people or other things, thinking that only if these things line up, then everything that God promised me will happen. Well, no, if God lines up, everything will happen, and God's always there. His consistency, him always being there, is what's most important. And then he revealed more of the plan to Abram to comfort his fears. And he let him know, this is how long this is going to take. We are in no rush. He said, your relatives are going to go into captivity. There's going to be many years, generations before they come back to this land. We always think it's something that God promises has to happen now. And God doesn't work on that timing. And that's a hard thing because we want to see it all happen. And a lot of times we are only a part of bringing that thing to happen, and we may never see it. We will see it in the end and how we played that part when we get to eternity. But trusting in that, allowing that shield of faith to just say, okay, I will trust you, God, and I will do what you ask me to do. And I'll be content with my place and my part in that. And then he called him to worship him, which we all are called to worship. Whether things are going the way we want them to right now or not, we need to worship God because he is working it out. And faith believes that. And it acts as it is true. And finally, God went about to seal the covenant with Abram. And he said, I am going to enact this covenant. And if you don't understand anything about covenants in the Old Testament, they weren't signed documents, but it was similar to what we consider a signed document today. Although it involved lots of dead animals. And so, but basically God signed a contract, and the contract only was upon himself and not upon anything Abram was to do. And isn't that what the cross provides us as well? God did all the work. Now he just asks us to follow him in faith and obedience. And so that's my encouragement for you today. Just allow that shield of faith to come around you, and you will be used by God in powerful ways if you just trust him. Allow those fears to go out and just take it one day at a time, living in faith, walking in faith. Thanks, everybody, for joining Daily Revelations. I will see you again tomorrow, and I'll be excited to share with you